She'd been following him through frozen mountains for days, starving and half dead, but she wouldn't stop. The exiled vampire king finally turned around, ready to send her away. Then she whispered 6 words that shattered him. "You owe me." My village burned. The snow fell like broken glass. Dorian pulled his hood tighter, pressing forward through the Silvervein Pass as wind screamed between the mountain walls. 3 weeks since the escape. 3 weeks of walking, hiding, starving. The leather straps of his traveler's cloak bit into his shoulders, but he didn't slow down. He couldn't. Exile meant death if they found him, and they were always looking. The trade route stretched empty ahead, white silence broken only by his boots crunching through ice. Perfect. No merchants this late in the season.
No hunters. No.
He stopped. There it was again. That sound. Footsteps. 30 yards back.
Light.
Uneven.
Human.
Dorian's jaw tightened. He'd sensed someone following him for the past 2 miles, staying just out of sight around the bends in the pass. Not a vampire. Their movements were too smooth, too predatory. Not a soldier. Too clumsy, too slow. Just some fool with a death wish. He kept walking, faster now. The footsteps matched his pace, stumbling through drifts. Whoever it was, they weren't trained, weren't armed with anything that mattered. He could lose them in the next valley, cut through the forest, disappear like smoke. The footsteps faltered.
Stopped.
Then a sound that made him freeze, a body hitting snow. Dorian turned around. 50 feet behind him, a figure lay crumpled in the road. Dark hair spread across white ground. Thin arms. A waitress apron showing through a torn coat, the kind they wore in those frontier taverns that dotted the pass. He should keep walking. This wasn't his problem. The world had made that clear when they stripped him of everything. But his feet wouldn't move. Damn it, he muttered. He closed the distance in seconds, crouching beside the collapsed woman. She was maybe 25, with hollow cheeks and frostbitten fingers clutching at nothing. Her lips had gone blue. Snow matted her hair. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days. Hey, he shook her shoulder. Wake up. Her eyes fluttered open, gray, fierce, furious even through the exhaustion.
You.
Stopped, she whispered, breath fogging in the cold. You're dying. I know. She tried to sit up and fell back. Been dying for months. Dorian scanned the pass. No shelter for miles. The temperature would drop 20 degrees after sunset, 15 minutes from now. She wouldn't survive another hour out here. He could still leave. Should leave. He had nothing to offer anyone, least of all some random human who'd been stupid enough to follow a stranger into the frozen mountains. But those eyes, that look. She wasn't begging. She was demanding. Who are you? He asked. Cale Morrison, she coughed, and blood flecked her lips. And you're going to help me. I don't help anyone anymore. Yes, you do. Her fingers latched onto his wrist with surprising strength. You owe me. Dorian went very still. I don't know you. Iron Gate Prison. Cell 14. Every night for 2 weeks, her voice sharpened despite the cold eating through her. Metal bowl. Dried meat. Stale bread. Water that actually had water in it instead of rust. The memory hit him like a blade between the ribs. Iron Gate. The pit they'd thrown him in after the coup, after Valander had torn the crown from his head and declared him traitor to his own kind. 2 weeks in the dark, chained to stone, while they debated whether to execute him publicly or let him rot. Someone had been sliding food under his cell door at night. Not much, scraps really, but enough to keep him alive. He'd assumed it was a sympathetic guard. Never saw a face. Never heard a voice. Until now. That was you? That was me. Cale's grip loosened as her strength faded. And 3 days after you escaped, they came for everyone who'd been near that prison. Warlords. Valander's hunters. Looking for traitor sympathizers. The words landed like stones. They burned my village, she continued, each syllable costing her. Killed my family. Took everything. Because I gave you bread. Dorian's throat tightened. I didn't ask you to. I know, her eyes closed.
But I did it anyway.
And now you're the only one who can make it right. I can't make anything right. I'm nothing now. No power, no crown, no. Liar. His head snapped up. Kale forced her eyes open again, and this time there was something burning in them that cut through the cold. You're Dorian Cole, the vampire king who ruled for 300 years, who ended the blood wars, who made it so humans didn't have to lock their doors at night. She pulled herself halfway up, leaning on her elbows, shaking violently. They say your power's gone. They say you're broken. But I've been watching you walk for 6 miles, and you're not even tired. Your breath doesn't fog. And your eyes. She pointed at his face. They're still red when you think no one's looking. Dorian jerked back. He'd been careful. So careful. Keeping the crimson from bleeding into his irises, staying weak, staying human-looking. But she'd noticed. Your power isn't gone, Kale said, her voice dropping to something cold and certain. It's locked away. And I'm going to help you get it back, so you can kill every last one of the monsters who destroyed my life. Why would I do that? Because if you don't, she smiled, teeth chattering, I'll follow you until I freeze to death on your conscience. Every night, every road, until you break. Silence. Just wind and snow and 2 people staring at each other like the world had shrunk to this single moment. Dorian looked at her, really looked.
Starving.
Frostbitten. Half dead already. And absolutely, terrifyingly serious. He stood up, turned his back, took 3 steps away. Then he stopped.
Damn it.
He walked back, knelt down, and scooped Kale into his arms. She weighed nothing. All bone and fury. There's a way station 2 miles east, he said quietly. If you die before we get there, that's not on me. Deal, she whispered, and passed out against his chest. Dorian adjusted his grip and started walking, faster now, as darkness swallowed the past behind them. He'd spent 3 weeks running from his past. Now, apparently, it had caught up. The way station looked like it had been abandoned twice and rebuilt by someone who'd given up halfway through. Crooked walls. A roof that sagged in the middle. Smoke leaking from a chimney that probably hadn't been cleaned in years. But it had a door, and doors meant walls, and walls meant warmth. Dorian kicked the entrance open and carried Kale inside. The interior matched the exterior. 3 tables, a bar that leaned left, and a fireplace throwing weak orange light across the room. An old man behind the counter looked up, saw Dorian's face, and immediately found something fascinating about the floor. Smart. Dorian laid Kale on the bench closest to the fire. Her skin had gone from blue to gray. He grabbed a blanket from the rack near the door, moth-eaten, but dry, and wrapped it around her shoulders. Water, he said to the bartender.
And food. Now.
The old man moved fast, returning with a wooden cup and a bowl of something that might have been stew once. Dorian pressed the water to Kale's lips. She coughed, swallowed, coughed again. Her eyes opened. Still alive, she muttered. Disappointing. Drink. She obeyed, draining half the cup before pushing it away. Then she grabbed the bowl and ate like someone who'd forgotten what food tasted like. 3 bites.
5.
She didn't slow down until the bowl was empty. Dorian sat across from her, arms crossed. Talk. Kale set the bowl down carefully, meeting his stare. The firelight made her eyes look darker. Angrier. 6 months ago, she started. You were locked in Irongate Prison. Maximum security. 20 guards. Stone walls 3 feet thick. She leaned forward. I worked at the tavern across the street. The Broken Helm. We served the guards during their shifts. I remember the place. Then you remember the smell. Cheap beer and cheaper men. Her jaw tightened. They talked. Bragged about the great vampire king rotting in a cell. About how Valander would make an example of you. Public execution. Head on a spike. Dorian said nothing. One of the guards, Marcus, he was different. Didn't laugh at the jokes. Looked sick every time they talked about torturing you. Kale's fingers traced the rim of the empty bowl. I asked him why. He told me you were the reason his daughter was still alive. That 15 years ago, you'd stopped a vampire raid on his village. Killed 3 of your own kind to protect humans you'd never met. Marcus was a good man. Kale's voice went flat. They executed him 2 days after you escaped. Found out he'd been loosening your chains at night. The fire crackled. Dorian felt something cold settle in his chest. I didn't know he was doing that. Of course you didn't. You were half dead yourself. She pulled the blanket tighter. But I knew. I watched him. And I thought, if Marcus believes this vampire deserves to live, maybe I should too. So, I started sneaking food from the kitchen.
Bread.
Dried meat. Whatever I could carry. I'd wait until the guard rotation changed, then slide it under your door. Why risk it? Because I was stupid, she laughed, bitter and sharp. I thought there were still rules. That honor meant something. That if I saved a king's life, maybe karma would pay me back someday. Dorian leaned back against the wall. It didn't.
No.
It really didn't. Kale's hands clenched into fists. You escaped on a Tuesday night. I remember because I was supposed to work a double shift. Instead, I woke up to screaming. Valander's warlords had surrounded Irongate. They were hunting anyone connected to you, guards, staff, visitors. Anyone. Her voice cracked. I ran home. Thought maybe I could warn my family, get them out before she stopped. Breathed. I was too late. They'd already been there. My parents. My little brother. Everyone on our street who'd ever spoken to someone who worked at that prison. Dorian closed his eyes. Kale. They burned the houses with the people still inside. Her words came faster now, sharper. 23 families. Gone in one night. And you want to know the worst part? They left notes. Carved into the doors. Traitor sympathizers die with the traitor king. Silence filled the room like smoke. I'm sorry, Dorian said quietly. Sorry doesn't bring them back. Kale stood up, swaying slightly, but her voice stayed steady. You escaped. You're free. You get to walk away from everything. She pointed at him. I don't. I see their faces every time I close my eyes. I hear my mother screaming. My brother, he was 12, Dorian. 12-inch. I didn't ask you to help me. I know. She slammed her hand on the table. I know you didn't ask. I know you don't owe me anything. I know the world doesn't work that way. She took a shaking breath. But I also know you're not powerless. I've been watching you for 3 weeks. Following your trail. Asking questions. And everyone says the same thing. Dorian Cole's power is sealed, not gone. Locked by some ancient magic that only breaks under specific conditions. Dorian's expression hardened. You don't know what you're talking about. Then tell me I'm wrong. He didn't. Kale stepped closer, and despite her size, despite her weakness, there was something terrifying in her eyes. Help me kill the warlords who destroyed my village. Help me burn Valander's fortress to the ground. Help me make them pay. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Or I swear on my family's ashes, I'll follow you until one of us dies. Dorian stood, towering over her. And if I say no, she smiled, cold, broken, determined. Then you better get used to company. They left the way station at dawn. Dorian didn't say yes. Didn't say no. Just started walking and Kale followed, exactly as she'd promised. The Silvervein Pass opened into wetlands by midday. The frozen marsh stretched for miles, a maze of dead trees and ice-covered pools that reflected the gray sky like broken mirrors. The temperature had dropped again, turning the air sharp enough to cut. Kale kept pace behind him, silent but present. Always present. You should go back, Dorian said without turning around.
No.
You'll die out here. Then I'll die following you. Her breath came harder now, but her footsteps didn't slow. I've already lost everything. This is all I have left. Dorian stopped walking. Spun around. You want vengeance?
Fine.
Go find Valander's warlords yourself. Hunt them down. Die trying if that's what you need. He gestured at the frozen wasteland around them. But stop following me. I'm not your answer. Kale tilted her head, studying him. You're scared. Excuse me? You're scared of what happens if you unlock your power. That's why you won't help. She moved closer. What are you afraid of, Dorian? That you'll become the monster they say you are? Or that you already were one? His hand shot out, gripping her shoulder, not violent, but firm enough to make a point. You don't know anything about me. I know you ruled for 300 years without burning the world down. I know humans lived longer under your reign than any vampire king before you. I know. The howl cut through the air like a blade. Dorian released Kale instantly, his head snapping toward the tree line. 3 more howls answered the first. Close. Too close. What was that? Kale whispered. Frost direwolves. He scanned the marsh, counting shadows between the trees. Pack hunters. They smell blood from miles away. I'm not bleeding. Yes, you are. He pointed at her hand. Your frostbite opened. Probably happened an hour ago. Kale looked down. He was right. Her fingertips had cracked, leaving small trails of red on the snow where she'd been gripping branches for balance. How many wolves? She asked.
7.
Maybe 8-inch. The shadows moved. Massive shapes emerged from the dead forest, wolves the size of ponies, with fur like frost and eyes that glowed ice blue. Their breath came in visible plumes. Their teeth caught the dim light. The lead wolf growled, low and hungry. Run, Dorian said quietly. Where? Anywhere that's not here. The wolves attacked. 3 from the left.
2 from the right.
The rest circling to cut off their escape.
Gal stumbled backward, tripping over frozen reeds.
The nearest wolf lunged, jaws wide, aiming for her throat. Dorian moved. He was there between one heartbeat and the next, catching the wolf by its neck and throwing it 15 feet into a tree. The trunk cracked. The wolf didn't get up. The others hesitated. Dorian's eyes flared red, bright, furious crimson that burned like lit matches in the gray light. When he bared his teeth, his canines had lengthened into something inhuman. Back off, he growled. The wolves didn't listen. 4 attacked at once. Dorian caught the first by its muzzle, twisted, and snapped its neck with a sound like breaking ice. The second wolf clamped onto his arm. He didn't flinch, just grabbed its skull and crushed it. The third and fourth circled, trying to flank him. He was faster. Dorian spun, his coat flaring out like wings, and struck with precision that shouldn't have been possible for someone supposedly powerless. Every movement was controlled. Lethal. The kind of speed and strength that only vampires possessed. The wolves retreated, whining. Kale watched from the ground, eyes wide. She'd seen him move before, but not like this. Not with this kind of brutal efficiency. The lead wolf, larger than the others, with scars across its face, stepped forward. It didn't attack, just stared at Dorian with something like recognition in its ice-blue eyes. Then it bowed its head and backed away, taking the surviving pack members with it. Silence returned to the marsh. Dorian stood motionless for a moment, chest heaving, eyes still burning red. Then the crimson faded. His canines retracted. The monster disappeared behind the man. He turned to face Kale. You lied, she said. I didn't. You lied. She pushed herself to her feet. You said your power was gone. Sealed. But you just killed 3 direwolves like they were puppies. That wasn't power. That was survival instinct. Bullshit. Kale walked toward him, ignoring the wolf corpses. I saw your eyes. Your speed. Your strength. You're not powerless, Dorian. You're restrained. She stopped right in front of him. What's sealing you? What's holding you back? He looked away. You don't want to know. Try me. Ancient magic. Blood magic. The kind that binds a vampire's true nature to specific conditions. His voice went flat. To unlock my full strength, I'd have to break the seal. And breaking the seal means what? Becoming what I was before. Uncontrolled. Unstoppable. He met her eyes. The last time my power was fully unleashed, I leveled a city. Killed thousands. That's why I agreed to the seal in the first place, to prove I could rule without becoming the thing everyone feared. Kale processed this. But you could do it.
If you wanted to.
You could break the seal and fight Valander. Yes. Then do it. And risk destroying everything? Again, he shook his head. The seal exists for a reason. Without it, I'm not a king. I'm a weapon. Kale grabbed his arm, the same one the wolf had bitten. The wound was already healing, flesh knitting back together in real time. Then be a weapon, she said. Just aim it at the right target. They reached High Court Citadel 2 days later, just as the sun bled into the horizon. The fortress rose from the mountainside like a broken tooth, towers collapsed, walls crumbling, gates hanging open on rusted hinges. Vines had claimed the stone. Snow filled the courtyards. Everything that had once been grand now looked like a corpse. Dorian stopped at the entrance, staring up at the structure. This was yours? Kale asked. For 200 years, his voice carried something she hadn't heard before. Loss. Before Valander decided he wanted it more. They walked through the gates. Inside, the destruction was worse. Throne room gutted. Tapestries burned. The floor was littered with shattered stone and dried blood that had turned black with age. Kale touched a pillar, and it trembled under her fingers. Why bring me here? Because if we're going to do this, if we're actually going to fight Valander, you need to understand what you're asking for. Dorian moved to the center of the throne room, where a broken crown lay half-buried in debris. This place remembers everything. Every oath, every betrayal, every drop of blood spilled in its name. Sounds like a metaphor. It's not. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in an instant. Kale's breath fogged. Frost spread across the floor in spiral patterns, moving like it was alive. The walls began to glow, faint blue light seeping from the cracks in the stone. Dorian, what's happening? They're waking up. He didn't move, didn't look afraid. Just resigned. The Guardians. Spectral protectors bound to the Citadel's foundation. They serve the bloodline. The light coalesced into shapes. First 1, then 3, then a dozen, translucent figures in armor, their faces hidden behind helmets that hadn't existed in centuries. Knights. Warriors. Loyal soldiers who died defending this place. The largest stepped forward, its voice echoing like wind through caves. Dorian Cole. You abandoned your throne. Why do you return? I didn't abandon it. It was taken. You fled. You hid. You let the kingdom fall. The Guardian raised a spectral sword, pointing it at Dorian's chest. Cowards do not deserve the crown. Kale moved instinctively, stepping between Dorian and the ghost. He's not a coward. 12 helmeted heads turned toward her. A human speaks. In our halls. In our sanctuary, the lead guardian tilted its head. Why does a mortal defend the fallen king? Because I know what he did before he fell. Kale's voice didn't waver despite the cold eating through her bones. I know he stopped the blood wars. I know he made laws that protected people like me. And I know. Words mean nothing.
Humans Liechtenstein.
They always lie. The Guardian moved closer, its form flickering. How do we know you are not a spy? Not an agent of the usurper? Because I saved his life. Kale shot back. Prove it. Kale glanced at Dorian. He watched her with something unreadable in his expression. Curiosity, maybe, or concern. She turned back to the Guardian. Iron Gate Prison. Cell 14. 2 weeks before he escaped, I brought him food. Every night, she closed her eyes, remembering. Metal bowl. Old. Dented on the left side. The kind they use in military prisons because they can't be sharpened into weapons. Dried meat, venison, I think, because the tavern got a shipment from the northern hunters. Stale bread. Always stale because fresh bread wouldn't last the trip from the kitchen to the cell. The Guardians went silent. The water, it was clean. I made sure of that. The guards used to give him rust water, half frozen, meant to weaken him. But I brought water from the well behind the tavern. Cold, but pure. She opened her eyes. And on the last night, I brought him an apple.
Red. Small.
The only one I could steal without getting caught. Dorian's expression shifted. You never told me that. You were unconscious most of the time. But I left it on the floor next to the bowl. She looked at him. Did you eat it? He stared at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I woke up and thought I'd imagined it. The lead guardian lowered its sword. The bloodline remembers truth. The stone remembers kindness. It turned to Dorian. She speaks without deception. The bond is real. Then you'll let us pass?
Dorian asked.
We will allow you to seek what you came for. The guardian gestured toward the far end of the throne room, where a staircase descended into darkness. But know this, fallen king. If you break the seal on your power, you will awaken more than strength. You will awaken the ancient guardian, the one bound to your bloodline, the one that destroyed armies when your ancestors ruled. Kale felt ice form in her stomach. What does that mean? It means, another guardian answered, that freeing Dorian's true nature will summon a force that cannot be controlled, cannot be reasoned with. It will protect him and destroy everything else. There has to be another way, Kale said. There is not. The lead guardian began to fade. Power demands price. Always. The question is whether you are willing to pay it. The specters disappeared, leaving only cold air and silence. Dorian looked at the staircase leading down. Last chance to walk away. Kale stepped toward the stairs. I've come too far to stop now, even if it means waking something that could kill us both. She met his eyes. Especially then. The village appeared through the snow, like a wound on the landscape. Makeshift shelters built from salvaged wood and torn canvas. Smoke rising from inadequate fires. People wrapped in whatever fabric they could find, huddled together for warmth. Children with hollow eyes. Adults who'd forgotten how to hope. Refugees.
Hundreds of them.
Kale stopped at the edge of the settlement, her hand covering her mouth. Where did they all come from? Everywhere Valander's warlords have been, Dorian's voice was quiet. Every village burned. Every town conquered. The survivors end up here, in places like this, because they have nowhere else to go. They walked into the camp. People looked up, saw Dorian's face, and reactions split down the middle. Half recoiled. Mothers pulled their children closer. Men reached for weapons that weren't there. One woman spat on the ground at his feet. Vampire, she hissed. You brought this on us. But the other half did something Kale didn't expect. They knelt. An old man with a scar across his face dropped to one knee, had bowed. A woman missing her left arm did the same. Then others. A dozen refugees, kneeling in the snow, while another dozen watched with hatred in their eyes. Your Majesty, the scarred man said. You came back. Dorian looked uncomfortable. I'm not. You are. You'll always be. The man stood slowly.
I'm Thomas Reit.
Served in your border guard 20 years ago. You personally stopped a vampire raiding party that would have wiped out my village. He gestured at the kneeling people. Every person here has a story like mine. You saved us. Protected us. That's why we remember. A younger man pushed forward, anger bright in his face. Remember? He abandoned us. Where was the great vampire king when Valander's army came? When they burned Ashford? When they slaughtered Millbrook? He pointed at Dorian. He ran, like a coward. I was imprisoned, Dorian said quietly. And then you escaped. And you hid, the young man's voice cracked. My sister died screaming for help that never came. Don't talk to me about protection. Silence fell heavy across the camp. Kale stepped forward. Where are Valander's warlords now? Thomas answered. Frostmaw Fortress. 3 days north. They've fortified it with something, he hesitated. Something unnatural. Winter magic that shouldn't exist. The temperature drops to lethal levels within a mile of the walls. Anyone who gets close freezes solid. How many warlords? Dorian asked. 7 that we know of. But there's something else. Thomas exchanged glances with the other refugees. They're keeping humans there. Alive. In cages. Kale's blood went cold.
Why?
The frost magic, it runs on blood. Human blood, a woman spoke up, her voice shaking. They drain people slowly, keep them alive as long as possible to fuel the spells. My husband is there. My daughter. They took them 2 months ago. Dorian's hands clenched into fists. How do you know this? He asked. Because some people escape. Not many, but some. Thomas pointed toward a tent at the far end of camp. We have one here. Hunter named Marcus Reeves. He got out 3 weeks ago, half frozen, barely alive. He's been telling everyone what he saw. I need to talk to him, Dorian said. They followed Thomas through the camp. More faces watched them pass, some grateful, some hateful, all desperate. Children too thin, old people too tired. The weight of loss hung over everything like smoke. Thomas stopped at a tent and pulled back the flap. Inside, a man lay on a cot, wrapped in blankets. His skin had a blue tint. His fingers were black with severe frostbite, but his eyes were clear and sharp. Marcus Reeves, Thomas said. This is... I know who he is. Marcus tried to sit up, failed, settled for propping himself on one elbow. Dorian Cole, the king who disappeared when we needed him most. I'm here now, Dorian said. Little late for that, Marcus coughed, wet and painful. But maybe not too late to do something useful.
Come closer.
I'll tell you what you're up against. Dorian and Cale moved to his bedside. Marcus's voice dropped low. Frostmaw Fortress is a death trap. Valander's not there himself, too smart for that, but his generals run the place. 7 vampire warlords, each one commanding 100 soldiers. They've got frost mages working the blood magic, keeping the temperature lethal. How did you escape? Cale asked. Luck. And sacrifice. His expression darkened. My cellmate, a woman from Pinewood, she created a distraction. Let them drain her completely, so I could run during the chaos. I made it to the outer wall, climbed over, and ran until my legs stopped working. The humans in cages, Dorian pressed. How many? Last count? 300. Maybe more. Marcus looked directly at him. They're starving them on purpose. Weak blood lasts longer in the spells.
Children.
Elderly. Doesn't matter. They use everyone. Cale felt rage building in her chest like a fire. We have to stop this. You can't, Marcus shook his head. The fortress is impenetrable. The magic is too strong. Anyone who tries dies before they reach the gates. He turned to Dorian. Unless you're not just anyone. Unless the rumors are true, that your power is only sealed, not gone. Dorian was quiet for a long moment. They're true, he finally said. Then unseal it. Fight them. Be the king we remember. Marcus grabbed Dorian's wrist with his ruined hand. Be the monster that monsters fear. They left the refugee camp at dusk and made camp on the frozen lake 2 miles north. The ice stretched endlessly in every direction, smooth as glass and twice as cold. Stars emerged overhead, sharp pinpricks in a black sky. No wind, no sound, just silence and cold, and the weight of everything they'd seen. Dorian built a small fire using wood they'd carried from the village. The flames reflected off the ice below, creating the illusion that they were suspended between 2 worlds. Cale sat across from him, staring into the fire. She hadn't spoken since they'd left Marcus's tent. You should eat, Dorian said, offering her dried meat from his pack. She took it without looking at him, chewed mechanically, swallowed. More silence. Say something, he finally said. What do you want me to say? Her voice was flat. That I'm horrified? That I can't stop seeing those children's faces? That every second we waste sitting here, people are dying in cages. She looked up, and her eyes were wet. 300 people, Dorian. 300 inch. I know. My family was 23 people. 23 deaths broke me completely. Made me chase you across frozen mountains. Made me willing to die just to make someone pay. She laughed. Bitter. Broken. 300 is a number I can't even comprehend.
How do you carry that?
How do you live knowing that's happening, and you're the only one who can stop it? Dorian poked at the fire with a stick. You get used to the weight. That's a terrible answer. It's the only one I have. He looked at her across the flames. You asked me earlier why I agreed to seal my power. Why I let them bind my strength behind ancient magic and rules. You said it was to prove you could rule without being a monster. That's part of it. He set the stick down. The other part is that I was tired. 300 years of being the thing people feared and needed in equal measure. 300 years of making decisions that saved thousands and killed hundreds. Of being called hero and tyrant in the same breath. His voice dropped. I wanted to be something smaller. Something manageable. So I agreed to the seal, to rules that would limit what I could do, what I could become. Kale watched him carefully. Do you regret it? Every day since Valander took the throne, he met her eyes. Because the seal didn't just limit my power. It limited my responsibility. I could tell myself I wasn't strong enough to fight back. That I'd done my part and earned my rest. His jaw tightened. But those children in cages? That's what happens when monsters aren't afraid anymore. When there's no one powerful enough to make them stop. So break the seal. And become what I was? Uncontrolled. Unstoppable. He shook his head. What if I can't control it this time? What if I break the seal and destroy everything? The fortress, the warlords, and all 300 prisoners. What if you don't? Kale leaned forward. What if you're stronger than you think? What if 300 years of ruling taught you control you didn't have before? That's a gamble with lives I can't take back. And doing nothing isn't? Her voice rose. Dorian, I didn't follow you because I thought you were perfect. I followed you because during your imprisonment, I watched you. Really watched you. She pulled her knees to her chest. The guards would come to the tavern and talk about torturing you, about breaking your fingers, carving symbols into your skin, starving you for days. He remembered every excruciating detail. But you never screamed, Kale continued. You never begged. You never used your strength, even the little bit you had left, to hurt the guards who hurt you. You just endured. With dignity, she wiped her eyes. That's not the behavior of a monster. That's the behavior of someone who's learned control through centuries of pain. Dorian was quiet for a long time. I fed you because I saw that, Kale said softly. I fed you because I thought if a vampire king can suffer like that without losing his humanity, maybe the world isn't as broken as it seems. Maybe there's still honor somewhere. She met his eyes across the fire. I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm not asking you to save the world. I'm just asking you to try. And if I fail, then we fail together. She smiled, sad but genuine. But at least we'll fail doing something instead of nothing. The fire crackled between them. The ice below groaned softly as it shifted. Dorian looked at his hands, hands that had built kingdoms and torn them down. Hands that had killed and saved in equal measure. Hands that could break the seal and unleash everything he'd locked away. You remind me of someone, he said quietly.
Who?
Myself. 300 years ago. Before the wait. Before the compromises. He looked up at her. When I still believed one person could make a difference. Do you still believe that? He thought about the refugees. The kneeling people. The hatred and hope mixed together. The children who would die if he did nothing. I'm starting to, he admitted. Kale stood up, walked around the fire, and held out her hand. Then let's make a difference. Dorian looked at her hand for a moment. Then he took it and stood. Frostmoth Fortress, he said. 3 days north. We'll need a plan. We'll figure it out. She squeezed his hand once before letting go. Together. The temperature changed on the 3rd day. One moment it was the normal bone-deep cold of mountain winter. The next, it felt like the air itself had turned to ice. Dorian stopped walking, his breath suddenly visible in thick, white clouds. We're close, he said. Ahead, the landscape twisted into something unnatural. The sky darkened from gray to bruised purple. Snow didn't fall. It hung suspended in the air, frozen mid-descent. Trees stood encased in ice, so thick they looked like glass sculptures. And through it all ran a wall of wind. Not normal wind. This was a barrier. a howling curtain of storm that stretched from ground to sky, circling the entire northern territory. Through the translucent wall of snow and ice, Kale could make out the vague shape of Frostmaw Fortress, rising like a black tooth against the horizon. "The magical barrier," she whispered. Dorian nodded. "Blood magic. The kind that requires constant sacrifice to maintain." He moved closer to the barrier, stopping 10 feet away. "Can you feel it?" Kale stepped forward and immediately understood. The cold wasn't just temperature, it was hunger. It pulled at her warmth, her energy, her life itself. Her fingers went numb. Her lips cracked. Ice crystals formed in her hair. She stumbled back, gasping. "It's feeding," Dorian said. "Taking heat, taking life. Anyone without supernatural protection dies within minutes of crossing. Then how do we get through?" "I cross. You stay here." "Absolutely not. Kale. We've had this argument already." She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering violently. "I'm not waiting outside while you fight alone. We do this together or not at all." Dorian looked at the barrier, then at her, calculating. "There might be a way, but it will cost me." "What way?" He held out his wrist. "Vampire blood has properties. Healing.
Strength.
And, in my case, protection against cold. If you drink it, you might survive the crossing." Kale stared at his outstretched arm. "Will it turn me?"
No.
Transformation requires intention, ritual. This is just temporary fortification. He met her eyes. "But it will hurt. My blood is sealed, remember? Locked behind magic. Forcing it to work for someone else means breaking part of that seal early. How much will it hurt?" "Me?" "Enough to weaken me before the fight even starts." His expression was serious. "You? You'll feel like you're burning from the inside out for about 10 minutes. Then it will stabilize." Kale looked at the barrier, at the fortress beyond, at the 300 people dying in cages. She held out her hand. "Do it." Dorian produced a small knife from his belt. He drew it across his wrist, a clean cut that immediately welled with blood. But this wasn't normal blood. It glowed faintly red, like embers in darkness, and steam rose from the wound despite the freezing air. "Drink quickly," he said, "before it freezes." Kale pressed her mouth to his wrist and drank. The effect was immediate and agonizing. Fire exploded through her veins. Her vision went white. She felt her heart stutter, then race, pounding so hard she thought it would burst. Every nerve in her body screamed. She collapsed to her knees, convulsing. Dorian caught her, holding her steady. "Breathe through it. Don't fight it." She couldn't breathe.
Couldn't think.
The fire spread everywhere, fingers, toes, lungs, brain. She was burning.
Dying.
Being unmade from the inside. Then, slowly, the pain began to change. The fire didn't disappear, it settled. Became warmth instead of agony. Her heartbeat stabilized. Her vision cleared. And when she looked at her hands, she saw faint red veins glowing beneath her skin, pulsing in rhythm with her heart. "How do you feel?" Dorian asked, still holding her. Kale stood on shaking legs. The cold didn't bite anymore. The wind didn't steal her breath. She felt strong.
Faster.
More aware of everything around her. "Like I could run a marathon," she said, then looked at him. "How do you feel?" Dorian's face had gone pale. Paler than usual. Dark circles showed under his eyes, and when he stood, he swayed slightly. "Like I gave away part of myself," he admitted. "The seal is cracking. I can feel it breaking piece by piece." He touched his chest. "My power is waking up, and so is everything that comes with it." "The ancient guardian?" "Not yet. But soon." He looked at the barrier. "We need to move fast. Cross now. Hit the fortress before I lose control completely." They approached the barrier together. The moment Dorian stepped into the wind wall, his body erupted with crimson light. His eyes blazed red. His canines extended. The seal fought against the barrier's magic, and the collision created a sound like thunder. Deep, resonant, terrifying. Kale followed, and the barrier recognized Dorian's blood in her veins. It parted reluctantly, allowing her through, but she felt it trying to drain her anyway. The glowing veins beneath her skin pulsed brighter, fighting back. They emerged on the other side, and the temperature dropped even further. Ahead, Frostmaw Fortress loomed, all black stone and ice, with towers that pierced the purple sky. Torches burned with blue flame. Guards patrolled the walls, vampires in armor, moving with predatory grace. And from somewhere deep inside, Kale heard screaming. Human screaming. Dorian's hands clenched into fists. Crimson light flickered around him like flames. "No more running," he said quietly. "No more hiding." Kale drew the knife she'd taken from the refugee camp, small, inadequate, but sharp enough to matter. "Let's end this," she said. They walked toward the fortress as the seal continued to crack and the sky above them began to bleed red. The merchant gate stood unguarded. Too easy. Dorian knew it immediately, but they had no choice. They couldn't scale the walls, not without attracting attention. So they approached the smaller entrance, dressed in stolen traveling cloaks, playing the part of traders seeking shelter from the storm. The guard at the door was young. Vampire, but barely a century old. He looked bored until he saw Dorian's face. Recognition flickered in his eyes. Dorian moved faster. His hand shot out, covering the guard's mouth, and he dragged him into the shadows. The guard struggled for 3 seconds before going limp, unconscious, not dead. "You're getting stronger," Kale whispered. "The seal is breaking faster than I thought." Dorian's voice had changed. Deeper. Rougher. "We have maybe an hour before I lose control completely." They slipped inside. The fortress interior was worse than Kale had imagined. The walls were lined with ice that pulsed with blue light, the blood magic Marcus had described. The temperature was lethal. Without Dorian's blood in her system, she would have frozen solid in seconds. But the cold wasn't the worst part. The cages were. They lined the corridors, iron cells stacked 3 high, each one containing humans. Emaciated. Shivering. Some unconscious. Others staring with empty eyes. Children pressed against their parents. Old people who'd stopped moving. Kale's hand flew to her mouth. 300, she whispered. He said 300, but seeing them, a woman in the nearest cage looked up. Her face was hollow, her lips blue. "Help us," she mouthed silently, too weak to speak aloud. Dorian approached the cage, examining the lock. Blood sealed. Only a vampire with authority can open them. Then open them. "If I do, the alarm sounds. Every guard in the fortress comes running." He met her eyes. "We'd be dead before we saved 10 people. So what do we do?" "Find the control room. The blood mages who maintain the spell. Kill them, and the locks release automatically." His jaw tightened. "But we have to do it quietly." They moved deeper into the fortress, past more cages, more dying faces. Kale wanted to scream, wanted to tear the doors open with her bare hands. But Dorian was right. Rushing would kill everyone. They reached a stairwell descending into darkness. Voices echoed from below. Laughter. The cruel kind. Dorian gestured for Kale to stay back, but she shook her head. They descended together, following the sound. The chamber at the bottom was massive. A throne room converted into something horrific. 7 vampires stood around a circular pool filled with glowing red liquid, human blood, still warm, still pulsing with stolen life. They wore armor marked with Valander's crest. The warlords. In the center, 2 mages worked the spell, chanting in a language Kale didn't recognize. The blood in the pool rose in tendrils, feeding into channels carved in the floor that spread throughout the fortress. "Lure him perfectly," one warlord was saying. The girl was bait from the start. Kale went cold. Another warlord laughed. "Burn her village, make her desperate, let her find the fallen king. Lead him right to us." He raised a goblet of blood in mock toast. Valander's plan was brilliant. The moment he crosses into the fortress, we trigger the trap. Drain his ancient blood. Use it to fuel the spell permanently. The first warlord grinned. No more feeding humans. Just one vampire king, suffering forever. Dorian's hand clamped on Kale's shoulder, not violent, but firm enough to keep her from rushing forward. She turned to him, and what she saw in his face made her breath catch. Not surprise. Not shock. He'd known. You knew, she whispered. You knew this was a trap. I suspected, he said quietly. And you came anyway? You let me walk in here. Because 300 people are dying. His voice was sharp but controlled. Because trap or not, those cages are real. That suffering is real. And if I turned back, I'd be proving I'm exactly what they say I am, a coward who abandoned his people. One of the warlords' heads snapped toward the stairwell. Did you hear something? Dorian released Kale and stepped into the open. Hello, Marcus, he said to the lead warlord. It's been a while. 7 pairs of eyes locked onto him. The warlord, Marcus, apparently, smiled slowly. Dorian Cole. Right on schedule, he gestured, and 20 guards emerged from hidden alcoves, surrounding them. Did you really think we wouldn't prepare for your arrival? I counted on it, actually. Dorian walked forward calmly, hands visible. Makes it easier when everyone I need to kill is in one room. Marcus laughed. Still arrogant. Still delusional. Look at yourself. You can barely stand. Your power is sealed. You're nothing. You're right. Dorian stopped 10 feet from the blood pool. I'm nothing. Just a failed king with a debt to pay. What debt? To her, he pointed at Kale. She saved my life when I was imprisoned. And, because of that, you murdered her family. Burned her village. Destroyed everything she loved. Kale stood frozen on the stairs, watching. So here's my offer, Dorian continued. Release the prisoners. All of them. Let them go free. And I'll surrender. You can have my blood. Fuel your spell forever. I won't fight back. Dorian, no, Kale started. Interesting, Marcus interrupted. But why would we negotiate when we can just take what we want? Because Dorian's eyes flared crimson. If you don't accept, I'll break the seal right now and kill every single one of you before your heart takes its next beat. The room went silent. You're bluffing, Marcus said, but uncertainty crept into his voice. Dorian smiled, and it wasn't human anymore. Try me? The chamber shook. Not from an earthquake. From the sudden pressure of power that exploded from Dorian's body like a shockwave. The crimson light around him intensified, throwing shadows across the walls. His eyes burned like stars. Marcus stepped back involuntarily. You wouldn't. Wouldn't I? Dorian's voice had changed completely, layered, ancient, terrifying. I've already lost everything. What's one more massacre? Guards, Marcus shouted. Take him. 20 vampire soldiers rushed forward. Dorian moved. He was there and gone, and everywhere, at once. The first guard reached him and exploded into ash before his sword could swing. The second and third suffered the same fate, touched by Dorian's hand and unmade instantly, their screams cut short. The seal was breaking. Really breaking now. Power poured off Dorian in waves. The blood pool began to boil. Ice cracked along the walls. And above them, far above, somewhere in the highest tower, something roared. A sound that shook the foundation of the fortress. What was that? One of the warlords whispered. Kale knew. The ancient guardian. Waking up. 10 guards lay as ash on the floor. The remaining 10 backed away, fear bright in their immortal eyes. The warlords drew their weapons, but none of them moved to attack. Then the far wall shattered. A figure stepped through the debris, tall, impossibly beautiful, with frost-white hair and armor made of ice that looked like solidified winter itself. His eyes were the color of frozen lakes, and when he smiled, the temperature dropped another 20 degrees. Valander. Not a general. Not a warlord. The usurper king himself. Cousin, he said, his voice smooth as silk. You came back. Dorian turned, crimson light still flickering around him. Valander,
I'm disappointed.
I thought you'd stay hidden forever. Live out your exile in peace. Valander descended the broken stairs, ice forming beneath his feet with each step. But you always were predictable. Throw one human girl at you, manufacture a tragedy, and you come running like a loyal dog. You planned this from the beginning. Of course I did. Valander gestured at Kale. Her village, her family, all necessary sacrifices. Bait to lure you out of hiding. And here you are, exactly where I wanted you. He raised one hand, and frost spread across the floor in intricate patterns. Did you really think I'd leave anything to chance? Dorian's hands clenched. The prisoners. Our leverage. Insurance. The moment I heard you'd cross the barrier, I knew you'd come for them. The great Dorian Cole, protector of the weak, savior of humans. Valander's smile widened. So noble. So foolish. Kale watched from the stairwell, her heart pounding. The power radiating from both vampires was crushing. The air itself felt heavy, charged with violence, waiting to explode. Let them go, Dorian said quietly. This is between us. No, Valander's expression hardened. You had your chance to rule. 300 years of your precious peace that made us weak. Made us dependent on human cooperation instead of human fear. He spread his arms. I've spent 5 years rebuilding what you destroyed, teaching our kind that we are predators, not diplomats. And now, with your blood fueling my magic, I'll rule for 300 more. You'll rule nothing. Dorian attacked. He crossed the distance in a heartbeat, his fist aimed at Valander's chest. But Valander was ready. Ice erupted from the ground, forming a wall between them. Dorian smashed through it like paper, but Valander had already moved, appearing behind him, frost spreading from his hands. The duel was instant chaos. They moved faster than Kale's eyes could follow. Dorian's crimson power clashing against Valander's ice magic, each impact shaking the fortress to its foundation. Stone walls cracked. The blood pool froze solid, then shattered. The warlords and guards scrambled for cover as the two ancient vampires tore through the chamber. Valander created a spear of ice and drove it toward Dorian's heart. Dorian caught it mid-thrust and crushed it, then grabbed Valander by the throat and threw him through a pillar. The stone exploded. You were always stronger, Valander gasped, rising from the rubble. Blood, his own, dripped from his mouth. But strength isn't enough. You're still holding back. Still afraid of what you'll become. I'm not afraid anymore. Liar. Valander's eyes gleamed. You're terrified. That's why you sealed yourself. Why you ran. You know what happens when you unleash everything. He raised both hands, and the entire chamber filled with frost. So let me help you. Let me force you to show your true nature, the monster that destroyed cities, the weapon that killed thousands. The frost became blades, hundreds of them, all aimed at Dorian. They launched simultaneously. Dorian roared, and crimson fire exploded from his body, melting the ice before it could touch him. But the effort cost him. He dropped to one knee, breathing hard. The seal was almost completely broken now. Kale could see it, cracks of light spreading across his skin like fractures in glass. And with each crack, his power grew stronger, more uncontrolled, more dangerous. Kale. Dorian's voice cut through the chaos.
Run. Get the prisoners out. Now.
I'm not leaving you. That's not a request. His head snapped toward her, and his eyes were fully crimson now. No humanity left, just burning power. If you stay, I'll kill you. The seal is breaking. I won't be able to tell friend from enemy much longer. Valander laughed. Finally, the truth emerges. Above them, the roar came again.
Closer now.
Louder. The ancient guardian was coming. The ceiling exploded inward. Stone and ice rained down as something massive descended into the chamber, a creature of pure elemental fury, neither fully solid nor fully spectral. It stood 30 feet tall, formed from crystallized frost and ancient magic, with eyes like frozen suns and a body that shifted between ice and storm. The ancient guardian. It landed between Dorian and Valander, and its voice shook the walls. Bloodline conflict detected. Ancient protocols engaged. All threats will be eliminated. No, Kale whispered from the stairs. It's going to kill them both. The Guardian's massive arm swept toward Dorian. He barely dodged, rolling away as the impact cratered the floor. Valander tried to retreat, but the Guardian's other arm shot out, a spear of ice that pierced through his shoulder, pinning him to the wall. Dorian, Valander screamed. All arrogance gone. Stop it. You're the primary bloodline. Command it. I can't. Dorian's seal cracked further, crimson light bleeding through like wounds. The seal broke the connection. It doesn't recognize me anymore? The Guardian pulled its arm back, preparing to crush Valander completely. But then it paused, its head swiveling toward Dorian. Seal detected. Unauthorized binding. Removing obstruction. It reached for Dorian. Kale moved, without thinking. She ran down the stairs, her body still enhanced by Dorian's blood, and threw herself between him and the Guardian's descending hand. The impact should have killed her instantly, 30 tons of magical ice coming down like a hammer. Instead, something impossible happened. The moment the Guardian touched her, it recoiled. Human. Marked by primary bloodline. Bond detected. Kale stood frozen, the Guardian's massive hand hovering inches from her face. Through her veins, Dorian's blood pulsed bright red, visible through her skin like glowing rivers. It can sense you and me, she gasped, looking back at Dorian. Your blood. It thinks I'm connected to you. The Guardian tilted its head, analyzing. Unauthorized human carries bloodline essence. Explain. Kale's mind raced. The refugee healer, the old woman at the camp, had taught her something. A chant. A protection spell used by humans who'd served under Dorian's reign. She barely paid attention at the time, but now the words came flooding back. She raised her hands and spoke in the ancient language, her voice shaking but clear. By blood given freely, by bond forged in mercy, by the old law of protection, I claim sanctuary under the primary bloodline. The words hung in the air like visible things. The Guardian went completely still. Old law recognized. Human claims blood protection. Evaluating. Behind her, Dorian struggled to his feet, the seal fracturing further with each second. Kale, what are you doing? Saving your life, she said. And everyone else's. She turned back to the Guardian and continued, remembering more of the healer's words. The king's first duty is protection. The king's second duty is justice. The king's third duty, her voice strengthened, is to ensure no innocent suffers for his mistakes. The Guardian's eyes brightened. Ancient covenant invoked. Protection before conquest. Mercy before vengeance. It looked down at Kale. Do you invoke the king's debt? Yes, Kale said firmly. Dorian Cole owes me a debt. My family died because of his escape. My village burned because I saved him. He owes me justice, not destruction. Controlled justice. And if the seal breaks completely? If the king becomes the weapon? Then I'll stop him myself. The words came out stronger than she felt. But I won't let you kill him before he's had a chance to make things right. The chamber fell silent except for the sound of ice cracking, both from the Guardian and from Dorian's fragmenting seal. The Guardian straightened to its full height. Human bonded to primary bloodline invokes old law. Covenant supersedes protocol. It turned toward Dorian. The seal will complete its break. The weapon will emerge. But the human's claim creates new binding. What does that mean? Dorian managed. It means, the Guardian said, reaching toward Kale with surprising gentleness, she becomes your anchor. It touched her forehead with one crystalline finger. Pain exploded through Kale's skull, white-hot and all-consuming. She felt something being carved into her consciousness, a connection being forged that shouldn't exist. Through the agony, She sensed Dorian, his rage, his power, his centuries of pain and control. And then she felt the seal shatter completely. Dorian's scream tore through the fortress. His body erupted with crimson light, so bright it was blinding. Wings of pure energy burst from his back, vast and terrible and beautiful. His true form emerged, the Vampire King at full power, unleashed for the first time in 300 years. The warlords who remained turned to ash simply from the proximity to his power. Valandor ripped himself free from the ice spear and tried to run. He made it 3 steps before Dorian appeared in front of him. "You wanted the weapon," Dorian said, his voice echoing with inhuman resonance. "Here it is." His hand punched through Valandor's chest. The Usurper King's eyes went wide. Ice spread from the wound, not Valandor's magic, but Dorian's power freezing him from the inside out. In seconds, Valandor had become a statue of frost and blood. Dorian shattered him with a gesture. Then he turned toward the Guardian, power blazing, ready to destroy everything. "Dorian," Kale's voice cut through the rage. He stopped, looked at her, and through their new bond, she sent one thought: "Your debt is paid when no one else dies because of you." The fortress trembled under the weight of Dorian's power. He stood in the center of the ruined chamber, wings of crimson light stretching 20 feet on either side, his entire body radiating energy that made the air itself burn. His eyes were no longer just red. They glowed like dying stars, ancient and terrifying. The ancient guardian watched, motionless, waiting to see what the unleashed weapon would do. Kale felt every surge of his power through their bond. The rage, the hunger, the instinct to destroy everything that had caused pain. She could sense how easy it would be for him to level the entire fortress, to kill everyone inside, warlords, guards, prisoners, and not stop until the entire territory was ash. But she also felt something else underneath, the 300 years of discipline, the control he'd learned through centuries of ruling, the humanity he'd fought so hard to keep. "Dorian," she said again, quieter this time. "Look at me." Slowly his head turned. For a moment, she thought she'd lost him. His expression was alien, inhuman, the face of something that had forgotten what mercy meant. But then, barely visible beneath the power, she saw recognition flicker. Kale, her name came out distorted, layered with echoes. "You need to run. I can't control." "Yes, you can," she stepped forward despite every instinct screaming at her to flee. "I can feel you through the bond. You're still in there. You're still you. I'm a weapon. You're Dorian Cole, another step. The king who ended the blood wars. Who made laws that protected the weak. Who endured torture without breaking. She was close enough now to touch him, though the heat radiating from his body made her skin sting. Who let himself be sealed because he cared more about the world's safety than his own power. His wings flickered, destabilizing. "You're asking me to control this?" His voice cracked. "This is what I was before the seal. This is what destroyed cities." "No," Kale placed her hand on his chest, right over his heart. Through the bond, she pushed back against the rage, not fighting it, but channeling it. "This is what you became when you were alone. When you had no reason to hold back. When no one believed you could be more than a weapon." The crimson light began to shift, becoming less chaotic. "But you're not alone anymore," she continued. "You have a debt to pay. 300 people in cages. They don't need a weapon. They need a king who remembers what protection means." Dorian's eyes met hers, truly met them, and for the first time since the seal broke, she saw the man beneath the monster. "Help me," he whispered. "Always." Through their bond, Kale drew on the healer's training, on the protection spells, on everything she'd learned. She didn't try to suppress his power. That was impossible. Instead, she gave it direction. Purpose. She reminded him why he'd unleashed it in the first place. The crimson wings began to retract. The burning light dimmed to a manageable glow. Dorian's breathing steadied, and when he looked at his hands, They were his own again. Powerful, yes, but controlled. He turned to the ancient guardian. "Release the locks," he commanded, his voice still resonant but human. "Free the prisoners. All of them." The guardian studied him for a long moment. "The weapon has found its anchor. The covenant holds." It raised one massive arm, and throughout the fortress, the sound of locks clicking open echoed like rainfall. The cages were opening. Dorian collapsed to his knees, the effort of maintaining control clearly exhausting him. Kale knelt beside him, keeping one hand on his shoulder, maintaining their connection. "The blood mages," she said. "They're still." Dorian gestured weakly toward the blood pool. It exploded, the corrupted magic dissipating in crimson mist. The two mages who'd been maintaining the spell screamed as their connection severed, then fell unconscious. "Frostmaw's magic is broken," he said. "The barrier will fall. The prisoners can escape." From above, they heard sounds, footsteps, voices crying. The prisoners were moving, finding their way out of the cages, discovering they were free. The guardian began to fade. "The crisis is resolved. The primary bloodline has proven control." I returned to dormancy. It looked at Kale one last time. "Maintain the anchor, human. Without you, the weapon will emerge again." Then it vanished, leaving only frost in the air. Kale helped Dorian stand. He was shaking, barely able to support his own weight. The power was still there. She could feel it through the bond, but maintaining control was costing him everything. "We need to get you out of here," she said. "No," he steadied himself against the wall. "I need to help them. The prisoners. They'll be weak, confused. Some are injured," he looked at her. "But I can't do it alone. I'm too unstable. If I lose control again." "You won't. I'll stay with you." She squeezed his hand. "We'll do this together." They climbed the stairs together, emerging into the main corridor. Prisoners stumbled past them, hollow-eyed, emaciated, but alive. Some recognized Dorian and fell to their knees in gratitude. Others just ran, desperate to escape. Kale found the woman she'd seen in the cage earlier, the one who'd mouthed, "Help us." She was carrying a child, moving slowly. "Let me help," Kale said, taking the child. The woman looked at her with tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you." Dorian watched Kale help prisoner after prisoner, guiding them toward the exits, and something in his expression softened. "Your debt," he said quietly. "It's not paid yet. Not until they're all safe." "Then let's finish it," Kale replied. Together, they began the work of saving everyone they could. 6 weeks later, the Great Hall of High Court Citadel had been rebuilt, not to its former glory, but to something new, something better. The throne remained broken, deliberately left that way as a reminder. Instead of one seat of power, there were 12 chairs arranged in a circle. The new council. 7 vampires. 5 humans. All survivors. All chosen not for their bloodlines or their wealth, but for what they'd endured and what they'd learned from it. Dorian stood before them, dressed simply in black, no crown, no royal regalia. The crimson light still flickered beneath his skin occasionally, a reminder that his power remained unsealed, barely controlled. But the bond with Kale held. It always held. She stood beside him, wearing the formal robes of First Counselor. Scars traced across her hands from frostbite that hadn't fully healed. Her face was thinner than it had been, but her eyes burned with purpose. "The last of Valander's warlords has been executed," Dorian announced to the council. "Marcus Reed's lieutenants surrendered this morning. The Northern Territories are secure." One of the human council members, Thomas Reed from the refugee camp, leaned forward. "What about the remaining loyalists? The vampires who still believe in the old ways?" "They have a choice," Dorian said. "Adapt to the new laws or face exile. I won't execute them for holding beliefs, but I will end them if they act on those beliefs violently." His voice hardened. "The days of humans as cattle are over. Anyone who disagrees can leave my territory or die defending their position." A vampire council member spoke up, an older woman named Sarah Chen who'd lost her entire family to Valander's purges. Some say you're too lenient. That mercy is weakness. Some said the same thing 300 years ago. Dorian met her gaze. I proved them wrong then. I'll prove them wrong now. And if you lose control? Another vampire asked quietly. If the seal breaks completely again? Silence fell across the hall. Kale stepped forward. Then I'll stop him. That's my role. That's why the bond exists. She looked at Dorian, and despite everything, the pain, the loss, the horror they'd witnessed, there was trust in her expression. He's not infallible. He's not perfect. But he's trying. And that's more than anyone else has offered. Thomas stood. I was there. In the refugee camp. I watched my people starve while warlords held feasts. I saw children die of cold while vampires lived in luxury. He looked around the circle. This king, imperfect as he is, walked into a fortress designed to trap him. Broke his own seal, risked becoming the monster everyone feared, just to free people he'd never met. His voice cracked. That's not weakness. That's the kind of strength we need. One by one, the other council members nodded. Then we're in agreement, Dorian said. The new laws stand.
No enforce servitude.
No blood taxes. No hunting humans for sport. Vampires who need blood can take willing donors, compensated fairly. Humans who harm vampires face the same justice as vampires who harm humans. He paused. We're not two species at war anymore. We're one empire trying to survive. What about reparations? A human council member asked. For the villages destroyed? For the families killed? Kale answered. We've established the Restoration Fund. Every vampire noble contributes 10% of their wealth. Every human family that lost someone receives compensation, not enough to replace what they've lost, but enough to rebuild, to start again. And the fortress? Sarah asked. Frostmaw. Destroyed, Dorian said flatly. I reduced it to rubble 3 days ago. The stone was too corrupted by blood magic to salvage. The site is now a memorial, marked with the names of every prisoner who died there. The council murmured approval. One last matter, Thomas said. The question everyone's asking. Will you take the crown again? Will you be king? Dorian looked at the broken throne, at the circle of chairs, at the council that represented both species equally. No, he said. I'll be something else. A protector. An enforcer. The thing that ensures these laws are followed, and these people are kept safe. He turned to Kale. She'll speak for the council. She'll make the decisions that require wisdom. I'll handle the decisions that require force. And if we disagree with you? Sarah challenged. Then we'll argue. Loudly, probably. A hint of a smile crossed his face. But ultimately, this council makes policy. I just make sure policy is respected. That's a lot of trust to put in a group, another vampire noted. I know. Dorian's expression became serious. But I've learned something these past weeks. Power without accountability becomes tyranny. Strength without purpose becomes destruction. He looked at each council member in turn. I have the power. You all have the purpose. Together, maybe we can build something that lasts. The council voted. 12 hands raised in agreement. The new empire was born. Later, Kale found Dorian standing on the Citadel's balcony, looking out over the reconstructed city below. Lights flickered in windows. Human and vampire homes side by side. Not perfect, not peaceful yet, but trying. Do you think it will work? She asked, joining him. I don't know, he admitted. But we're going to try anyway. Your debt, she started. Is never fully paid, he interrupted. I know. 300 years of ruling taught me that. Every decision creates new debts. New responsibilities. He looked at her. But you made me remember why those debts matter. Why carrying them is better than running from them. Kale leaned against the railing. My family would have liked this. The council, the laws, the idea that their deaths meant something. They did mean something. Dorian placed his hand over hers. They meant everything. Below, the city continued its slow healing. Above, Stars emerged as darkness fell, and between them, two people who'd saved each other stood guard over a fragile peace built from blood and mercy, imperfect, difficult, but worth protecting. Rumors spread across the territories. The Vampire King had returned, not to reclaim a throne, but to forge something new. Not to rule alone, but to share power. Not to be worshipped, but to be held accountable. And beside him stood a waitress who'd followed him through frozen mountains. The woman who'd saved a king and made him remember what it meant to be human. The end.